In Onitsha Market, on the eastern bank of the Niger River, a 13-year-old boy wakes at 4 in the morning on a foam mattress at the back of his uncle's store. Before 5, he folds the mattress and moves it out of the way. He opens the stall, sweeps the floor, and stacks the cartons of imported electronics his uncle sells. By 6, customers have begun to enter the market. The boy has lived there for 2 years. His father brought him from their village in Anambra State and placed him with the uncle to learn the trade. The arrangement is called Igbo Boy, an Igbo apprenticeship system in which a young person works under an established trader for several years. At the end of the apprenticeship, the trader is expected to provide money or goods that will allow the apprentice to begin a business of his own. The arrangement can last between 7 and 10 years. The boy's father receives a small payment from the uncle during this period. The payment is irregular, but it forms part of the understanding between the two men. The boy works about 14 hours a day. He handles smaller sales and negotiations while his uncle controls the larger transactions and the cash box. He eats twice a day from a food vendor nearby. He no longer attends school. He completed primary 4. When the family could no longer afford to educate all the children, it decided that his older brother would remain in school and the younger boy would enter the apprenticeship. The older brother is now studying engineering at Nnamdi Azikiwe University in Awka. Part of the money supporting that education comes from the payment the father receives through the younger boy's work. The boy described here is a composite. No single child is being portrayed. The details come from experiences common to many apprentices in markets across southern Nigeria. This episode is about the different ways children's labor supports households, businesses, and industries. The International Labour Organization adopted the Minimum Age Convention in 1973. It sets 15 as the general minimum age for employment, with 14 permitted in some developing countries, 13 for certain forms of light work, and 18 for hazardous work. In 1999, the ILO adopted the worst forms of child labor convention. It covers slavery, trafficking, armed conflict, commercial sexual exploitation, drug trafficking, and work likely to harm a child's health, safety, or development. The convention achieved universal ratification in 2020. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child also recognizes a child's right to education and protection from economic exploitation. Every country in the world has ratified it except the United States. Nigeria passed the Child Rights Act in 2003. Because Nigeria is a federation, each state must adopt the law before it becomes enforceable there. Adoption and enforcement have varied across the country. These laws establish clear standards. They have not removed the economic conditions that place children into work. The most recent global estimates counted 138 million children in child labor in 2024. In Nigeria, 3 systems show how children enter labor through different routes. The first is the Almajiri system in northern Nigeria. The Almajiri tradition began as a form of Islamic education. Families sent boys to study the Quran and Islamic law under teachers known as malams. The earlier system operated within a social and political structure that supported Islamic scholarship. In its current form, many boys must beg on the streets for food and money to support themselves and, in some cases, their teachers. Estimates have placed the number of Almajiri children in the millions. In 2012, the administration of President Goodluck Jonathan built schools intended to combine Quranic education with formal schooling. Many of those schools later lost funding or stopped functioning as planned. The result is that large numbers of boys remain outside the formal school system and survive through begging and informal work. The second form is domestic labor. Children from rural communities are placed in wealthier households in Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, and other cities. Most are girls, although boys are also involved. Some arrangements are made through relatives. Some are described as apprenticeship or fosterage. Some include payment to the child or the child's family. Others become trafficking or domestic servitude. A child may cook, clean, care for younger children, wash clothes, and perform other household work while receiving little or no education. The same system can extend beyond Nigeria. The trafficking route from Edo State through Libya into Italy has carried Nigerian women and girls into sexual exploitation in Europe. Organizations including Idea Renaissance have documented this route for many years. The third form is apprenticeship. The Igbo Boys system operates across Onitsha, Aba, Nnewi, Lagos, and other commercial centers. Similar arrangements exist among Hausa and Yoruba traders and craftspeople. When the system works, it allows a young person without capital to learn a trade and later open a business. Many successful traders began this way. The system also depends on years of unpaid or underpaid work and on the promise that the master will eventually settle the apprentice. There is often no formal contract. When the master keeps the agreement, the apprentice may leave with enough money or goods to begin independently. When the master refuses, the apprentice can lose 7 or 10 years of work and enter adulthood with no capital, no qualification, and little power to recover what was promised. The boy in Onitsha is still inside that uncertainty. His family has accepted the arrangement because it may produce something later. His uncle benefits from the boy's labor now. His older brother remains in school. The boy carries the risk that the promise made to him may not be kept. Child labor also enters international supply chains. The clearest example is cocoa. Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana produce about 2/3 of the world's cocoa. That cocoa is sold to processors and chocolate companies including Nestle, Mars, Hershey, Cargill, Mondelez, and Barry Callebaut. It moves from farms in West Africa through processing facilities, factories, shipping networks, and supermarkets around the world. In 2020, the National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago published a major study of child labor in cocoa growing areas of Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana. The study used data from the 2018 and 2019 harvest season and included interviews with thousands of household heads and children. It estimated that 1.56 million children were engaged in child labor in cocoa production across the two countries. About 1.48 million were involved in hazardous work. That work included using machetes, carrying heavy loads, handling agricultural chemicals, and working hours that interfered with school. The study also found that child labor in cocoa growing households had increased over the previous decade, while cocoa production had also increased. The chocolate industry had already promised to address the problem. In 2001, major companies signed the Harkin-Engel Protocol after proposed legislation in the United States threatened to require labeling connected to forced and child labor in cocoa. The companies agreed to eliminate the worst forms of child labor by 2005. That deadline was missed. Later deadlines were also missed. By 2020, the available data showed that the problem had grown. One attempt to hold companies legally responsible reached the United States Supreme Court. The case was Nestle USA versus Doe. 6 men from Mali alleged that they had been trafficked into Côte d'Ivoire as children and forced to work on cocoa farms supplying Nestle and Cargill. They said they worked long hours without pay, were locked in rooms at night, and were beaten when they tried to escape. They brought the case under the Alien Tort Statute, a United States law that allows non-citizens to sue in federal court for some violations of international law. In 2021, the Supreme Court ruled against them. The court decided that the corporate activity taking place in the United States was not enough to allow the case to proceed for conduct that occurred abroad. The ruling did not determine that the abuse had not happened. It determined that the plaintiffs could not use that legal route to hold the companies responsible in a United States court. This is one reason child labor remains difficult to address inside global supply chains. The company may be headquartered in one country, the farm may be in another, the child may come from a third. The product may be sold around the world. Responsibility is spread across several places, while the child remains at the point where the work is done. For many years, industries responded through voluntary agreements. The Harkin-Engel Protocol is one example. The Kimberley process for conflict diamonds is another. The Voluntary Principles on Security and Human Rights covers extractive industries. The Bangladesh Accord was created after the Rana Plaza factory collapse. These agreements have produced some reforms, but many have missed their stated targets because companies could make commitments without facing strong legal consequences when they failed. Some governments are now replacing voluntary commitments with supply chain laws. Germany's Supply Chain Due Diligence Act came into force in 2023. Norway's Transparency Act came into force in 2022. The European Union adopted new corporate due diligence and forced labor rules in 2024. These laws require companies to investigate and respond to human rights risks in their supply chains. Their long-term effect is still unclear. The price of cocoa is another part of the problem. Farmers in Côte d'Ivoire have historically received only a small percentage of the final retail price of a chocolate bar. Processors, manufacturers, retailers, and financial companies receive most of the value created between the farm and the supermarket. Low farm income makes it difficult for households to hire adult workers. Children work because the family needs labor and cannot afford to pay for it. The consumer sees an affordable chocolate bar. The farmer sees a price that does not cover the full cost of producing it without family labor. The same pattern appears in other industries. Mica is used to create shimmer in cosmetics, automotive paint, and electronic products. In parts of India, children have worked in informal and illegal mica mines. Cobalt is used in lithium-ion batteries. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, children have worked in artisanal cobalt mining under dangerous conditions. Cotton production in Uzbekistan once depended heavily on state-organized forced labor. International pressure and government reform reduced that system significantly after 2017, showing that change is possible when enforcement reaches the level at which the labor is organized. The garment industry in Bangladesh also underwent major safety reforms after the Rana Plaza collapse in 2013. Those reforms improved building safety, although low wages and adolescent labor remain part of the industry. Some children and former child laborers have spoken publicly about these systems. Iqbal Masih was born in Pakistan in 1983. His family placed him into bonded labor in a carpet factory to repay a small loan. He worked for years before escaping with the help of the Bonded Labor Liberation Front of Pakistan. He became an international campaigner against bonded child labor. In 1995, when he was about 12 years old, he was shot and killed near his home. The circumstances of his death remain disputed. Kailash Satyarthi founded the Save the Childhood movement in India in 1980. His organization has helped remove thousands of children from bonded labor and trafficking. In 2014, he shared the Nobel Peace Prize with Malala Yousafzai. Juliana Dogbadzi has spoken publicly about the Trokosi system in Ghana, Togo, and Benin. Under that system, girls may be sent to religious shrines as punishment or reparation for an offense attributed to a relative. They may perform domestic and sexual labor for shrine priests for years. Ghana criminalized the practice in 1998, but enforcement has been uneven. Dogbadzi was sent to a shrine at the age of 7. She escaped at 17 and has spent decades speaking about what happened to her. The debate over child labor is not always as simple as adults deciding whether children should work. In Bolivia, working children organized themselves through a union called UNATSBO. They argued that banning their work without addressing the poverty that required them to work would push them into more dangerous and hidden conditions. In 2014, Bolivia passed a law allowing some children as young as 10 to work legally under regulated conditions. The law was later reversed, and the minimum age returned to 14. The importance of the Bolivian case is that working children spoke for themselves. They argued that they needed protection, education, regulation, and the right to organize. The boy in Onitsha has no comparable organization speaking from his position. Other people define the meaning of his work. His household sees an apprenticeship and a future business. His uncle receives labor. The law sees a child below the normal working age. A child rights organization may see exploitation. An economist may see a commercial training system. The boy's own view is not part of the public record. By midday, he is still in the market. He has already worked for several hours and has several more ahead of him. His work may help his older brother complete an engineering degree. It may help his father meet household expenses. It may help his uncle expand a business. Years from now, it may provide the boy with the capital to open a shop. It may also leave him with nothing if the promise is broken. That is the central problem in this episode. The household depends on the child's labor because the household has limited ways to support everyone inside it. The business depends on the child's labor because the apprenticeship makes that labor available at very little immediate cost. The wider economy benefits because goods and services remain cheaper when part of the work is done by children. The child carries the longest hours, the lost schooling, and the greatest uncertainty. The next episode follows another way the household plans its future through its children, marriage. End of episode 2, The Child as Labor. From Born, Ode, 10 Notes from Abroad.